I want today to, for the message, I have far more interest in you catching what I'm communicating than I do in preaching a message this morning. So if you will listen carefully, this is really important. I think this is an important day. It's been great that we've been able to be together. We do this once a year and go Texan, and it's a fun time for all of us. This is also a very significant day, as was last year when we did Go Texan Sunday, which I'll reference in just a moment. I want to begin today by asking you to take out of your program or on your chair was this little card that says Cornerstone Update. And if you'll pull that out for just a moment. And I want to ask you to remember a date. It is April the 10th. If you'll write that down, April the 10th is a Wednesday night, is our normal prayer meeting night in which hundreds of people gather here to seek the face of the Lord. And but on that Wednesday night, in particular, that week, beginning Monday, April the 8th, so the 9th and the 10th, and then during the morning of Thursday is our North American Conference for the Grace International Pastoral Family. So there'll be pastors and church leaders here from all over the nation and from all over the world. Hundreds of pastors and leaders will gather here those 3 days. We have been praying about that, prayer meeting, and planning on that, preparing for all of these who come our way. On that Wednesday night, we will dedicate the Grace International headquarters that's under construction right here, where our work crews are working many, many hours, doing everything we can to get that building as done as possible. So on that Wednesday night, we will dedicate that building that is our global headquarters for our ministries and churches in 126 nations of the world. Over 5,000 churches. That does not include our schools, our colleges, feeding programs, orphanages, medical clinics, all of those kinds of compassion-based ministries that we have. For example, just in our schools, many of our schools are located in areas that if we were not there with our schools, those children would receive no education. It's not that they would receive a poor education, it's that they would receive no education at all. So when you give to support, Becky and I have supported a number of kids in school for many, many years, in addition to all of our other giving, because we believe that every kid deserves a chance in life. And if you're going to have a shot in life, you need an education. And so we have given beyond everything else we give because we believe in supporting these children. So that building is the headquarters. It'll also house our church offices, but basically it's our global headquarters. We'll be dedicating that. The second thing that we'll be dedicating, I've never done 2 dedications and a groundbreaking in one night. It's sort of like a trifecta. I'm not even sure it's ever been done before. I've never heard of it in all my years. But we'll also be dedicating the new Cathedral Life Center, which is at the north end of this property, the old medical resort of the Woodlands that the Lord has just dropped in our lap. It's absolutely amazing. I was up there several times this week, and I walked through that building, and I just still stand in amazement that in the middle of everything else that we've been up to, that God picks his own time, and he works in his own way. Some things that we had planned and felt like we were called to do as a congregation, God accelerated the timing of that, because many of the things, or all of the things that are going to happen up there require a place, and we didn't have a place. So ministry to battered and abused women, women at risk, women who are pregnant and need a place to live while they carry the baby, and during that time get a job skill and life skill training, whatever they need, that when that baby's born, that both the mother has a shot at raising that baby if that's what she chooses, and that baby has a shot at life, or she chooses to adopt, that there's those services there. Our foster care ministry, which is pretty expansive in our church, is greatly expanded. All of these things that are family life that are related, women who've been involved in sex trafficking, and where there's a temporary shelter that's needed. Kids that are aging out of the Texas CPS system, where they're given a few bucks and put out on the street when they turn 18, a place where we can bring some of those kids in and attempt to find loving homes where they're able to develop, where they can handle themselves in life. So all of these compassion-based ministries that will be able to function out of that building. I've mentioned this a few times because of all the abuse that a number of you have given me over the lack of restrooms in this building. There are 92 restrooms in that building. 92 in one building. I don't ever want to hear it again. And then a place for dozens, 30, 40, 50, maybe even 60 ministers in training to come. Not only the 20 at a time program I've talked about over the years, where we bring in 20 pastors for an intensive time in a week to speak into them in regard to leadership in a smaller group setting, but to do everything we can to get pastors to get a little backbone and courage to stand up in the middle of this day. But now this provides a place where we can bring in pastors in training to live for a while. Our goal is not for them to live here permanently, but for 6 months or a year or 2 years max. And we are training them to sow them into the nation. I have, over the years, I've tried a number of ways. I've spoken more times than I can remember at pastor events, trying to get pastors to stand up for various ministries that are that's what they do. They're trying to get pastors in this hour. So I've done a lot of that, and I came to the conclusion that while I believe in and I think we should do every effort we can, because it's critical. This is a critical day, and it's time to save the day. I got a text this last week from a pastor. If I mentioned his name, pretty much everybody in the room would know this pastor. He's a friend of mine, and God used him in a extremely substantial way in impacting this nation. And he sent this text to me, and he said, I have never seen the nation in such a critical state. So because of that, the church cannot continue to passively exist and sort of be in their own world and not impact the day. We have been sidelined, marginalized, told to stay out of everything political. In other words, the church should never be involved in the governance of the nation at all. To that I say a resounding no way. No way. You cannot be biblical salt and light unless you are impacting every sector of society. And the church is called to do that and never retreat ever from that. The problem we have is that pastors, for some reason, somehow, I don't know how all of this came, but pastors have retreated into this place by and large. There are some who haven't. But the preponderance of pastors across the nation refuse to stand up, to speak up with courage, to confront the evil of the day. And somewhere we must raise up pastors to do that. There may be other ways, there may be better ways, I don't know. If there are, I don't know of them. But I believe what we are called to do is to lower our head and one at a time. Steve, what good will one at a time do? It'll do good wherever that one is. One at a time, we start sowing men and women into cities all across this nation who will gather other like-minded pastors, and they will be watching the city council and watching the school board. Why should the school board members be able to put policies in that are an anathema to the way of the Lord and to any parent who actually cares for their children? Why should that be across this land? And then thumb their nose at the parents who have their kids in those schools. Thank God for the 3 mama bears who were elected here in Montgomery County and who are courageously standing. So I don't know what can happen in my lifetime. Obviously, to put it in the vernacular of my friend Arnie Jacobson, I have limited shelf life, and at times I am circling the drain. That'll give you a few new illustrations for those who are elderly, if you want to use them. Thanks. We call those Arnieisms. And but I believe that God has ordained this, that we can begin. What if the day would come when out of this congregation there were 1,000 pastors and church leaders and churches across this land who were standing up in small towns and communities, in medium-sized cities and larger cities, and they were pastors who would challenge the congregation to vote and to vote biblically and lead them to do so. They would preach the whole counsel of the Word of God, and that men and women would rise up out of the congregation to step into the public square in leadership. Why should there be a void of people of faith with godly moral values, which is the only thing that will sustain a people in the end? Why should we retreat when Jesus said, influence the day and be light to the darkness? And so this building will help us do that. We didn't have any budget plan. We didn't have anything like that. For those of you that aren't aware, we just closed on it a week ago Friday. It all happened, the acquiring of the building happened in one day. One day. It's just, I've never seen anything like it before. And it's just obvious that, and our bank agreed to finance the whole thing 100%. And so it's just unreal. So we're going to dedicate that building on the same night. And then we're going to break ground on Cornerstone. That's the next phase of getting a larger place in worship. You can see by this crowd in this service. Early service wasn't this large, but early service has grown substantially over the last year. The 2 o'clock service is not this large, but getting close to this size. So facility-wise, we're running out of space. We're well over all of the averages that they'll tell you can run and sustain a growing church. And then our events, pretty much every event we have that's of any substance we fill this room completely, and there's no extra room. Some events have waiting lists. Some events, by the Sunday we announce it, by second service, there's 15 places left or something. I've never seen anything like this in my time. So it's a time of the blessing of the Lord. And a year ago, on Go Texans Sunday, we made commitments. And we've been giving them this last year. Something over $3 million has come in this last year. All that money's in the bank to go toward the beginning of this next building. So we've looked at how do we address all the needs that we have, and particularly in light of the kind of day in which costs are soaring, and we absolutely make our money count for the most. So this little brochure, hopefully it's clear. I wrote this and tried to make it as clear as we could so you would know the pathway forward. We have finally, after all these months of trying to sort this out, revised our original plan. This is the plan to go forward. And basically, we're going to do everything of Cornerstone in 2 phases. And the first phase will be a gathering place that's twice this size, or maybe a little more. So it'll seat more than double what we have here. It'll also handle more than double in tables, all of that. It'll serve as one building that we won't have to build in the future as a performing arts center, be able to double for that. Large community events, all of those kinds of things, which is part of our plan in serving our community. All of that will be handled in this first building. In addition, the lobby, not only for that building, but for the new the final auditorium will also be built. I hate to come back to this, but a very large bank of restrooms will be built in that building. And those will also be the restrooms for the final worship center. And we will have a kitchen that goes in there to service this large meeting room. So that'll be phase 1. And with this direction, we can actually begin on a part of that within the next few weeks. You'll see a construction fence going up very quickly, and within a matter of weeks, you'll see the guys out here digging the footings, pouring concrete as we move into this first phase. Second phase then would be the final auditorium. By the way, another practical point of the first phase is that by doing this, we preserve our entry over here for the main parking lot, and we preserve all of this parking. And then when that first phase is complete, then all of the entry into the facilities will switch into the new lobby. And then all of this back here, the drive-through, everything that's back here, this whole parking lot right back here, will be taken out, and the new building will completely fill that parking lot. It will be, it's just a big, large, square building, and it's about the least expensive thing that we could build. But when it's done, it will function very efficiently in worship. So I wanted you to know that. And on that Wednesday night, the 10th, we will break ground. So we're going to dedicate, break ground on that Wednesday night. It is a trifecta. We're going to do 3 things at once. The Lieutenant Governor will be here that night as a guest and a guest speaker that evening, and I want to encourage you to join with us. We don't take these ceremonies as times when we just do ceremonies. These are beginning times. These are times in which the commitments that we've made are actuated, and then the realities of those things of kingdom dimension being lived out are begun. And then we have a defining point, a beginning point, a demarcation as it was, in which we move into the things the Lord has for us. These are very exciting days for us, but they're not just excitement in a glib sense, that it's some happy emotion. These are kingdom days. In COVID, God began a work of his kingdom in response to prayer. And it wasn't just this part, but about 150 people who gathered every night for 12 nights prior to Pentecost, right in the middle of COVID, in this room right here. We gathered in response to what we believed was the call of the Lord. And as we did, it amazed me how many people came every night, and how the Spirit of the Lord directed those nights, and those nights birthed the present outpouring that we're finding ourselves in. God began to pour out of himself, and now hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people have come into grace. These past several years have been a time not just of increased crowds. You've seen these facilities all be grown to the max. Every time we have, we had a whole section of parking, and by the time we get it done, it seems like it's full. We had another section. All of this stuff has been going on in the middle of a pretty crazy day. And God has met us, and in that we have embraced this commission to be not just a growing church, but to be a penetrating force, an army that God has prepared in the middle of an evil day to be people who live out their faith and values in the middle of the public square, to be the church that Jesus said the gates of hell would not prevail against. I mentioned this a couple of times, that we came to the end of last year, as I was seeking the Lord, saying, Lord, so, I'm really grateful for everything. See your hand, all that you're doing. I do know that that life is lived in seasons. Seasons have a duration. And so even in times when God has moved in a great way, nationally or globally, nationally in revival and renewal, in the middle of those times, it would seem as if maybe that would go on forever, but for whatever reason, in the patterns that God himself has established of his own working, he limits that to a time frame. I've been around enough years to know that, not just from history, but to know that personally, in watching the seasons of the move of God and the work of God that Becky and I have been able to be a part of for 55 years. So wasn't that I came to the end of the year thinking that what God was doing was winding down, but it was, I guess, what would be sort of a normal a time with me. I get up really early every morning. Before the day begins, I am able to have a quiet time in which I get a lot of work done, but I also am able to seek the Lord and do my best to hear what God is saying. And so it wouldn't have been something out of the ordinary for me in that to say, Lord, what are you up to? What should I know that I don't know now? What should I see? What do I need to do to prepare for where we're going? That you want to speak into my spirit. I want to be quiet here. And I don't want to come to you with my plan, presenting to you, telling you all the things that we're going to be about, or asking you for everything. I just want to hear your heart and your direction for us as a people. And it was in that I believe the Lord spoke to me that he was not finished. And that while we were in this season, the season was not done, but that the season would in fact change. It would change. I didn't know how. I didn't know how at all. So the Lord didn't give me a plan. But I knew in my spirit, because I have heard that voice many times over the years, that the Lord said that the season immediately in front of you will unfold at a new dimension. And the Lord spoke a word into my spirit that I brought on the last Sunday of 23 called The Difference in a Day. Like I've said before, I don't normally preach on that Sunday, but I really felt like this was a prophetic word for the church as we moved into 24. And so I talked about the difference one day can make. When a tragedy comes, crisis, something happened you didn't anticipate, or conversely, something good, something you didn't anticipate. And the difference that can happen when God sets himself to move powerfully. And so I brought that Sunday not knowing exactly what would be, but I had this strong sense in my spirit that God was up to something. And so then many of you fasted with us for 21 days. And we ended those with 3 nights of revival. And that last night the room here was packed. We just came to seek the Lord. And some unusual things happened in that meeting and at the end of that meeting. Actually, some unusual things happened every night. Monday night was a spontaneous baptism when people decided to just step into obedience to the way of the Lord. And so I'd had this sense that I was to call the owners of the property up here. But I'd gotten busy and never got around to it. And Stu set a call up. We talked to him that following Thursday. On Friday, I'd never toured the building. We went through the building, and by Friday night, we had just some little things that don't seem much in and of themselves, except when you're at the other side and you look back and you see that God was up to something, even in the little things that almost seemed like coincidence. For example, I would have no way of knowing, but when we called the doctor and I said to her, look, I just want to say, if you're ever interested in selling the building, church might be interested. I had no idea. She said to me, well, we've closed the building down and we already have 2 offers. I thought, whoa, what is that? So that Thursday night, I just happened to send a text to Steve Toth, our state representative. Steve and Babette are members of the church here. And I said, hey, Steve, we're going to tour this building tomorrow. If you'd like to go, meet us there. So Steve came next morning. And he started running with the ball after we left. I was in meetings all day, and I kept getting texts and phone calls from Steve Toth all day long. He ran in. I never asked him to do anything, but one of the reasons we're up there is because I never heard of a state rep going and doing what Steve Toth did, but the Lord used Steve to talk to bankers and arrange everything. And by the evening, we had a letter of intent signed by us, signed by the buyer. The bank that had the building, where more money was owed on the building than it was going to be sold for, had agreed for us to buy the building, and our bank had agreed to do the funding on that, all in one day. The difference in one day. Pretty amazing. That was a Friday, and a week ago Friday, the title company came out, Brian Brewer with Momentum Title. Brian's a member of the church here. Brian handled the closing. Brian and his team came out, and we went up to that building, and we sat there at a table in that building, and we closed escrow for what I believe is a future that will literally impact the nation. God's moving at another dimension. So I believe God gave me a word today. I'm going to try to just hit the high points here for you. But because I could preach this message any other day, but I believe it is to be preached. I told Josh after first service, I believe this message is important for this day. Just as important as Cornerstone was 1 year ago when we met on Go Texan Day for that day. So let me just run through this as quickly as I can. And I'm going to read a bunch of this just for the sake of time, rather than sort of preach it. So forgive me for reading so much of the message here. We must have some church and ministry models that are penetrating the day, not just building crowds. Or churches that have a spirituality that never confronts the day, pressing back the darkness. Jesus is the one who said the gates of hell would not prevail against the penetrating power of his church. What will everything the Lord has placed before us then require of us? So while I'm giving you this Cornerstone update today, it is part of the larger picture of a new day that God ordained on his own by inserting himself in his own timing and thrusting us into a future we were not ready for. The first thing it requires of us is a kingdom understanding and embrace. Here is a scripture that the contemporary church of North America does not know how to deal with. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 46. The spiritual is not first, but the natural. The spiritual is not first, but the natural, and afterward, the spiritual. And in that verse and the surrounding verses, you discover the process and pathway that God works. So I want to briefly mention two areas. I'm not saying there aren't others. I just want to mention two in terms of example. Because the church in North America so ignores the natural in regard to the process, to the spiritual. And as a result of that, then most of everything is done in the flesh. Planning meetings. And I'm all for planning. But when far more time is spent on that which we can do than is spent on what God can do, we will only have what we can do at the end of the day. In Luke 16, Jesus says, he who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much, and he who is unjust in what is least is also unjust in much. Therefore, notice this, if you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to your trust the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in what is another man's, who will give you what is your own? If you've not been faithful in what is another man's, who will give you what is your own? If you read that, that should give you immediate understanding. He's really talking here about his kingdom. If you can't handle what's in your hand, why would somebody be crazy to trust you with what they have? And now you may have never seen this in this light. I want to ask you to just listen carefully to me. And because what I'm about to say is no ploy. This is not an underhanded ploy to get anything at all. It is a challenge to us as a congregation to live biblically. If God has opened before us a very large door of opportunity, and that door of opportunity has spiritual ramifications, not just for our church, far beyond our church, but before the day that we are in, for a nation that is headed into the abyss, then it isn't just an open door of natural opportunity. It is an open door into a realm of the Spirit that if we don't understand how to approach that spiritually, we will never see what it is that God has set himself to do. Here, notice this. He says, if you have not been faithful in a righteous mammon, who will commit to your trust the true riches? What are the true riches? Well, the true riches are what money cannot buy. What heaven comes to produce, money can't buy that. There have been charlatans who tried to manipulate people, and there are people who have tried to buy favors. We even know in church history of that kind of thing happening. People try to buy favors with God and try to buy their own healing and this and that. But money can't buy that. What's interesting, though, is Jesus doesn't say the natural doesn't matter, just get into the spiritual. But that's really what the church pretty much believes. The natural, it doesn't really matter much. In regard to the natural being the entry into the spiritual. Now, the church is in North America, is way more about the natural than the spiritual. I'm going to get to that in a minute. I don't want to be negative today. I want to be upfront, and I want to be direct. Because if we aren't, we will be what we are, rather than becoming what we are called to be. So what we do is we focus everything on what we call the spiritual, and we ignore the natural. And yet, we didn't set the terms of the natural, Jesus did, and the Word does. Let me give you one. If you can't handle mammon, what is the word mammon? The word mammon is money and what money can buy. If you can't handle your money, who would be crazy enough to give you their riches? Oh, and not just another person, but God. Why would God trust you with what money cannot buy if you can't handle what money will buy? That's the context here. Oh, no, it's actually beyond that. If you're not faithful in managing what's put into your hands in the natural, why would God trust you with his kingdom? This is about that. This is about his kingdom functioning. Now, look, in regard to your money, I don't know where you're going to get a better promise maker who is also the promise keeper than God when he calls you to actually put him first, and he does it with first a natural process. Oh, Jesus, I love you. I put you first. I worship you. I bless you. I bless you. But actually, the scripture talks about how you handle your money. How you doing with that? Is God first? You know? Malachi, the promise of God in Malachi 3 was, if you obey, you live under an open heaven. But if not, you're cursed with a curse. I mean, it's really hard to sanitize that. But I am actually shocked that many preachers in this country have sanitized it. Oh, it doesn't really matter. I think it really matters. I think it really matters because the natural pathway, the natural is the pathway to the spiritual. That's why it matters. It's not that God needs your money. It's that you need to be on God's path. We need to be. That's why as a church here, we honor that. The average church in the United States, they don't give near 10% of their money away. It's a small pittance. How they justify that is it's all ministry. We're all doing ministry. Well, if you spend everything on yourself, would that be right? I mean, is that somehow the heart of God? So of our church, we give about 25% away out of this church. Last year, $1.3 million. Over $100,000 a month that we invested in outreach. We don't have to do that. Nobody would blame us. And please, I'm not patting us on the back. I want you to know that we are practicing what I preach. We're sowing. The reason we're sowing is not so we can brag about what we do. The reason we're sowing is because we understand something. That what you do with the natural affects the spiritual. Because, see, we want his kingdom to come, his will to be done on earth as it is in heaven. So let's just deal with two. If, in fact, what you do with your money is the natural pathway into the spiritual, let's talk about one other area. Jesus said, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you've made it everything else. That's what he said when he drove the money changers out. Remember that? My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you've made it everything else. Remember, he's the one who said, pray like this, our Father in heaven, holy is your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Call forth another dimension to invade this dimension. If you want this day to be different, you can try to change it on your own. How's that working for us? How's that working for us? When we don't even know what a woman is anymore. A really, really smart person who is now in a high position was asked, how do you define a woman other than a man? So we're living in a day when we shake our head at what's going on around us. It's called perversity. It's called professing to be wise. We have become fools. The question is, can the dilemma of the day be fixed by natural process? And it doesn't mean natural process shouldn't be entered into, but can it be fixed by just natural process? The answer is no. No, no. You cannot fix a spiritual dilemma with a natural antidote. It doesn't work. So Jesus says, Paul says, there is first the natural. That is the process into the spiritual. If you get the natural going into the spiritual right, then there are those things that will never be because you have labored in the natural. They will only be because the spiritual has come to bear. Prayer. Prayer. So there are almost no churches in the country that have prayer meetings, corporate prayer meetings. Almost none. A few. Very few. Shockingly few. And yet Jesus said, my house shall be called a house of prayer. How in the heck have we been able to ignore that? Because we don't think it matters. Everybody believes prayer is important, but we find our rationale based in something else. What we think is that we can ignore the natural and still have the victories of the spiritual. But let me just tell you, folks, what you are facing today in the unfolding of this nation is absolutely demonic. And if the people of God don't get that, don't expect the world to get that. If the people of God, and I'm not talking about people puking on napkins and doing all kinds of weird, bizarre stuff in their little spiritual parties. I'm talking about people who understand how to wage war in the spirit and wade into this day, not afraid of the demonic, but people who understand that there is a name that is above that name, whatever demonic name there is. He is seated far above all principality, power, might, dominion, and every name that is named. And somehow, it is that realm that unless that realm comes in the middle of this desperate and dark day, things will continue to disintegrate, and your children will live in a very different world. Look, what I'm talking about today is not new. It's not new. If you read history, there are times in history all over the world in which things became very dark and very dismal, and then God would stir some people in obscurity, and they would begin to call on the name of the Lord. They would begin to gather in prayer, and they would labor and wage war in the spirit, pressing back the powers of darkness until breakthrough came. So the need of our country is, it's not like we haven't, other times in history, the world, parts of the world have not been where we are. It is that what will it take to awaken in this nation of freedom and religious freedom and a place where the people are the king, the president or the governor. No one else is the king in America. The people are the king because we actually put people in office who represent us, and they should represent our values. How long will it be until, forget the secular community, at least the people of God understand that if we call on him, he'll hear us. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face, if they'll turn away from their wicked ways, I'll hear from heaven and I will heal their land. We think we can ignore the natural and still have the victories of the spiritual. I sat down the other day. I felt the Lord moving in my spirit, and I wrote some things that have to do, not with the liberal church, but with the contemporary church. So programmed, so timed out, so oriented to a concert-type mindset. Structured so to appeal to a consumer. When what the church needs are crusaders, conquerors, people who can cast down every stronghold. What's before us will require a pioneer spirit. This is Go Texan Day. One of the things that's characteristic of Texas is a pioneer spirit. Remember the Alamo? What happened there? The Battle of San Jacinto, that was fought on April 21st, 1836, just down the road here from us. It was the final and decisive battle of the Texas Revolution, led by General Sam Houston. And it was a battle that lasted only 18 minutes, and Texas became free. So we have this pioneer spirit. Actually, let me sort of show you just a few pictures. We're going through them real quick. This was a year ago. This was our Cornerstone Commitment Sunday out on the plaza. We all got soaked. The pioneer spirit means commitment to a cause you believe in. It means sacrifice, and it means hard work. It means you have to give yourself to something. It can't be all about you. Nothing great is ever accomplished without great effort and great sacrifice. And if you are unwilling to do that, you will never participate in greatness in your life. Then let me wrap this up. This is Palm Sunday. It is the procession of Jesus on the donkey. And the cries of Hosanna, Hosanna, the Lord saves. We call it the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. But I would like to wrap it up today by giving you another view of what was taking place on that day. Because I think that what's before us will also require that we are in the right procession, that we're stepping into the story that God is writing, and we're partnering with what he's doing. Let me ask you, I'm going to read this as I finish today and pray. Let me ask you to think about the Palm Sunday scene in this way. Two colliding kingdoms were present in Jerusalem. It was Rome versus the kingdom of God. Two processions were coming from two different directions into the city of Jerusalem for this Passover season. Pilate came into Jerusalem from the west as he traveled from Caesarea of the Sea, which was 60 miles to the west of Jerusalem. Jesus came in from the east, down the Mount of Olives, traveling from Galilee, which was about 100 miles to the north. When I say two different directions, I'm speaking of two different directions, literally, figuratively, and spiritually. These two processions polarize each other in just about every aspect. There is the imperial procession of Rome, demonstrating its power, its authority, and its sovereignty. Rome's representative, Pontius Pilate, would be at the head of a column of a military cavalry of soldiers, both on horse and on foot. And he is leading them into Jerusalem at this same time because of the feast of what's taking place in the city on this time. Pontius Pilate is there to flex the military and political muscle of Rome. It would have been very common knowledge to the first century Jews because this is Passover. And Passover was celebrated because Passover was a time in antiquity when the Jewish people who were in slavery and subject to the tyrannical powers of Egypt were set free. And so Rome had to show up. You couldn't have an insurrection. Had to remind these people that they had no power at all. Keep them in bondage. Oh yeah, they may just come for this little Passover celebration, but as long as they just come and they do that and they go back to their place, and there never comes another time of the freeing intervention of the power of God, then it's okay. Imagine the imperial procession's arrival. Horses, soldiers, leather armor, helmets, weapons, banners, golden eagles mounted on poles, sun glinting on the metal and the gold, were all reminding the people who was in charge. Pilate's procession displayed not only imperial power, but also Roman imperial theology. According to this theology, the emperor was not simply the ruler of Rome, he was the Son of God. Then there is, coming from the other side of town, there is a procession that looks anything like what was happening on the side that Pilate came from. It was the procession of the kingdom of God, demonstrating its presence in a world that was dominated by force. It brought a different message, a message of hope to those who were lost in sin. That there was in fact a Savior who is Christ the Lord, who could remove the iniquity of the land in one day, called Calvary. Those who followed on that day had willingly submitted to follow this one who was called the Christ and submit to his way. His kingdom was coming upon the earth, not in a way that would have made any of the ruling powers nervous, but this kingdom would ultimately prevail. These followers were living their lives under the rule of their king. 2 parades, 2 processions coming into Jerusalem, and there is the collision of 2 kingdoms. When 2 kingdoms collide, one will ultimately prevail. One will serve the other. One will be brought into subjection to the other. And this, my friends, is where the Church of Jesus in North America just flat doesn't get it. We do not understand the nature of the day and the nature of the battle that we are in. We are too busy playing. Which kingdom prevails will determine the quality and capacity of life for those who live under its rule. It wasn't just true then, it's true today, because each kingdom has its own value system. On one side of Jerusalem, we have the imperial powers of this world marching into town, demonstrating that power and prestige under the delusion of all that is temporary and fading, all decked out in pomp and circumstance, and the world system looks invincible, just like it does in our day. The church is marginalized, mocked, made fun of, has lost almost all of its influence in the culture. Our values are demeaned. And even some of you live in fear if you say the wrong thing in the wrong place at the wrong time. It looks invincible. What can prevail against a force like that? But I will tell you that God is not done yet with America. Because there are still some people across this great land who understand that you don't have to have the majority, but if just 10 righteous can be found, Sodom will be spared. Another king's rule is beginning to be manifested. A procession is entering the city that would get no political coverage, wouldn't make the news of the day, wouldn't stand up at all to the imperial power of Rome making its appearance. This procession of the kingdom of God looks a little ragtag. Their king, Jesus, is riding on a donkey. The crowds that are cheering are the lame, the halt, the broken, the blind, the bound, and the abused. Because this king has come to set the captive free. This procession isn't about outward adornment. It is about a regal king of the ages who has come to rule in human hearts. That where those hearts open to his rule, his kingdom comes. And the lame walk, and the deaf hear, The blind see, the sick are healed, the captives are set free, and the broken are made whole. And there is a resounding cry that begins to echo throughout the day. Hosanna, God saves. May that cry once again be heard across this land and never be silenced. May the people of God rise out of their slumber in the middle of this hour. May we step forward in courage, unafraid of the repercussions of the lifting of our voice. And may we once again, over this great land, proclaim that our God reigns in the middle of this hour. May God bless America. May God bless His church. May He give us courageous pastors and preachers. May He give us people who will stand in the middle of the evil day and not back down. May God save us in the middle of this hour is my prayer. My question to you today is, which procession are you in? Which side of town? You over in the other one? Say, oh, Steve, I'm not in it, but are you watching it? You're so consumed with that one because you think that one's going to win or whatever. Might as well learn to deal with the devil. Maybe you need to go on the other side of town. You need to get in a procession. It may not look like much today, but I want to tell you that procession will ultimately triumph, for the kingdoms of this world will become the kingdoms of our Lord and of His Christ. The truth is, He shall reign forever and ever. Hallelujah. And it isn't just the words of Handel's Messiah. It is the truth that God Himself has proclaimed. So, it was a year ago, and I was standing right down here at the end of one of the services, and a little boy named Elliot walked up to me, and he handed me this envelope. I've saved it, and inside there's a quarter, and he designated that quarter to Cornerstone, our building fund. And he came up and he put that in my hand. And so I wrote Elliot a note. I hand wrote this note. It wasn't sent by my secretary. And I said, Elliot, thank you so much for giving to our new worship center, Cornerstone. Your coming up to me and handing me your envelope meant so much to me. Your giving will make a great difference. Thank you. What will this season require of us? It will require an open heart and an open hand with the spirit and heart of a child. Because those are the ones Jesus welcomes into His kingdom. What this will require is you, if we are up for this day. I don't mean just the building of buildings. I mean for what God has in front of us. It will require what it will require is you and me to be all in, because the day demands it, and our children are worth it. And someone must stand up in the middle of this hour. May it be the people of grace, and may we be an example to congregations, to churches, and to pastors all over this nation, so that 1 becomes 2 and 2 becomes 20, and then there's 100 and 200, and then there's 1,000, and then there are thousands, and then there comes a day when this nation looks a whole lot different. Lord, would you do today what I cannot do? Would you speak to people by your Spirit? Would you etch this word as you gave it to me on their hearts? Would you do it a whole lot better than I've been able to speak it? And just, Lord, as you have done things that have been amazing to me over the last few years, and now you've set us in this very large place, it's hard to deny that you're the one who did it. None of us could take credit for this. Now would you help us to be faithful for what you have handed to us? Would you help us to be people who finally get it, that until we learn to handle what you have put into our hands, you will not trust us with the true riches of your kingdom? How desperately we need those in our day. Would you cause this praying army that you've raised up here to greatly expand until the room will never contain it? And may heaven hear in response to the evil, the sound of evil that has risen to the heavens as in Sodom. May heaven hear another sound, the cry of the righteous in the middle of the evil day. May your kingdom come and your will be done, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen.